Welcome to Movies Are Life. Who better to break down gender dynamics in the New York City workplace in the 80s than two white males who were born in Texas in the 80s? I'm your host, Nathan Chandler, and today I'm welcoming in the co-host of the Second Best Picture podcast and returning guest, Brandon McMinn, to talk about the number 29 film on the 50 Best Rom-Coms list, Working Girl. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, sir.
Yeah. So before we jump into today's movie, we've mentioned the podcast before, but tell us a little bit about your podcast.
No, I appreciate it. Second Best Picture, what we do is we take a given year when films come out and we dissect everything that's nominated for Best Picture in that year. And then we talk about, what the Academy got right, what it got wrong, and what it missed entirely. And then at the end of that year, we spin it all into one Oscar episode where we really just eviscerate their decisions and then kind of vote on what we did. It is important. I always like to tell people when I say a year, it's like films that came out in 2001. But then the award ceremony would have been the 2002 when it aired, because we had a couple people that had a little confused at the beginning. So, but it's been a blast. I've had a great time.
Yeah. Well, personally, my favorite episode was when you did a little offshoot and you covered the 1994 hit film Speed. That I really think that episode
did
really
you
good. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, well, we had a hell of a guest. We had Movies Our Life own Nathan Chandler there to walk us through the trials and tribulations of a runaway bus in LA and at an airport. And I thought it was a big success. So thanks for showing up, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, that was fun. And honestly, I'm not just saying this because I know you two. I really enjoy the podcast, and it's become my Monday morning jogging playlist to listen to, and it's really great. Even if you haven't seen some of the Best Picture nominees, I think your banter is great. So anyway, I highly recommend it. So
well, I appreciate it, sir. And back at you. I feel like I've learned a lot about not only you but all your guests. You guys come on and talk about stuff. I'm like, I didn't know that. That's cool. So yeah, I love yours too.
Well, thanks, man. Well, let's tease up our hair and switch out our jogging shoes for pumps to discuss the 1988 film Working Girl.
In the land of opportunity,
they're not going to give you no shot test. They're going to shoot you.
Where dreams are won and lost.
Spray me down?
Sorry?
Well, I can't very well walk around my own party clinging.
Someone's about to get what she deserves.
I know I'm asking an awful lot, Tess, but I don't know what else to do. I need you to take over.
Working Girl is an American romantic comedy drama film directed by Mike Nichols, written by Kevin Wade, and starring Harrison Ford, Sigourney Weaver, and Melanie Griffith. Its plot follows an ambitious secretary from Staten Island who takes over her new boss's role while the boss is laid up with a broken leg. The secretary, who has been going to business night school, pitches a profitable idea only to have the boss attempt to take credit. The film was met with critical acclaim and was a major box office success, grossing a worldwide total of $103 million. Working Girl was nominated for six Brandon Academy Awards in 1989, including Best Picture, Best Director for Nichols, and Best Actress for Griffith, while both Weaver and Joan Cusack were nominated for Best Supporting Actress. The film also won 4 Golden Globe Awards from 6 nominations in 1989, including Best Motion Picture for a Musical or Comedy, Best Actress for Griffith, and Best Supporting Actress for Sigourney Weaver. So before we go into whether or not we agree with all the award recognitions there, I want to note that we had talked about this film before, and we both hadn't seen this film. And I had no idea what this movie was about. As much as I know about movies and everything, this is just one that, for whatever reason, I just didn't know anything about it. What about you?
I might have misled you a little bit. I had not seen this until about 2 years ago.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, I was completely novice. Honestly, I thought from the title, I thought it was kind of like a Pretty Woman wannabe.
I'm glad you said that.
Does that make me dense? I don't know. Maybe.
No, I totally, I don't know why. I thought this movie had to deal with a prostitute making it into the business world.
Were you as upset as I was that there was less prostitution than you had signed on originally for?
I won't lie, no. And I'm sure we'll talk about it kind of a little bit. I don't know if I know I've probably seen a trailer at some point, and I don't know, and I'm guessing there was probably a shot of Melanie Griffith in her underwear, and so that's why which there are a lot of shots of in this movie. So I don't know if that's where I made that like correlation, but when the opening credits opened and it was a Mike Nichols film, I was like, oh, what? I had no idea, because I haven't seen everything he's done, but I'm a huge fan of The Graduate. Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf is an amazing movie. I mean, he's made up a lot of the fabric of American cinema. So I was even surprised by that. I didn't know he had directed this film.
That was a surprise when I first saw it too. I celebrate his later stuff. I love Primary Colors, which was him. And there was something else he did later in life. I was like, hey, look at that. Mike Nichols going strong still. Yeah, I had seen this film made the circuit of network TV in the late 90s, early 2000s. And I'd always seen that iconic shot of them kissing on the steps at the foyer of the one office. And so I don't know. This is on your list of rom-coms. Do you think this is a rom-com that you've seen it now?
I don't think it has lots of laughs. So, I think there's little moments that might kind of garner a chuckle, but I didn't really see it as that.
Yeah, I think almost every scene Joan Cusack is in is like just teed up. Like they have her come in to lighten the mood. This movie, of course, they filmed in 87. It came out in 88. It is shockingly rough. Like for a rom-com status, Tess McGill, not an easy life she's got going. And when we join her on that ferry, that's as good as it's going to get for a while. That cupcake with a couple of candles in it. Like, we got a rough hour to go for Tessa's journey, to be honest. She just kind of gets crapped on.
Yeah. She really does. And so another thing that I was shocked by when doing research for this, because I didn't look before I started the movie, but when I saw that it was nominated for all the awards that it would been nominated for, I think this is a good movie. I personally didn't feel like it was a great movie. So seeing like all the recognition it got, it really surprised me. Like, how do you feel about that statement?
It's a good question, because you go into like product of its time.
Yes.
Because this is, we see a lot of underdog turning the tables stuff now. That's a very common trope we see in cinema. It's right up there with Fish Out of Water. It's right up there with other things. This, and I would go with Trading Places, really for like they pushed. I mean, the 80s were all about economics and money and everything else and excess and all that stuff. This was one of those movies that really tapped that vein, along with the gender dynamic of Tess having to turn the tables in order to get ahead in the world that she was just being marginalized left and right in. Yes. So I understand. Also, my introduction to this film, it's my wife's like second or third favorite film. Like, she's like, you've never seen Working Girl. We have to watch it. So I get the accolades, maybe not, this is going to sound rough. I get Best Director because there were some things they did with that camera that I know they had to do practical. Like there was no drones or CGI in this film. They got a helicopter to fly around Long Island, and that's pretty cool.
I'll cut you off for a second. I did also to touch on that. Even the opening ferry scene, like that's a bunch of people on a ferry crossing, I guess the Hudson.
I think so. Yeah, I'm not up to date on my, maritime geography of New York and whatnot, but I do think it was worthy of Best Picture, and I do think it was worthy of Best Director. I'm a little sketchy on the Melanie Griffith performance.
I agree.
She's kind of the blank slate that this world has to bounce off of, like. And it's been well documented. I don't know if you did any research on it. I mean, she was suffering from about 2 or 3 different addictions during filming and whatnot. And it shows. It really, unfortunately it does.
It does.
There are times when she needs to be the smartest person in the room, and she's barely in the room. So that's problematic. I was talking to Kristen about this because we watched it for this podcast as well. I can't remember the one scene the scene when it's toward the end, and I'm sorry, I'm jumping way ahead, spoiler alerts and everything like that. But when she looks at Sigourney Weaver and she's like, stop lying. unfortunately, her voice is high anyway. And when she's stressed, it goes an octave higher. And I'm like, oh, that sounds like a child talking to an adult. And I know they're playing it because Tess is true, but yet not refined. Whereas Catherine is all polish, but absolute lies and empty and hollow. But it grated on me after a while. I was like, oh, can we have her stop handling the exposition scene? You know what I mean? So yeah, that's probably the one I bump into more. And I would say, did Sigourney Weaver get nominated too for an Academy Award?
Yes, she got nominated Best Supporting Actress.
Yeah, I find that one a little specious as well. I think that's a little bit of stunt nominating, which I think the Academy does sometimes.
Yeah,
because she's not really. I mean, she's barely in it, to be honest with you.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, the plot necessitates that, but still, but fun. She's a blast, and she knows exactly what she's doing and working with, and so she is just playing it up to the hill in almost every scene she's in.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, and once again, I was going in with a clean slate with this. I haven't seen Melanie Griffith in a lot of things, even looking at, even though she's worked for a really long time, she's just an actress I've never really seen very much. And so watching this movie, I was just not connecting to her very much. And then when doing research about this movie after I watched it and seeing those substance abuse issues that she had, and that, I mean, she's admitted to and all that. I mean, they had production delays because of it. It completely made sense, because it does feel like someone's in the room physically, but not spatially there in a lie. And so, yeah, that's kind of it totally made sense when I read that. And I'm with you as far as the recognition. What I did appreciate about this movie was that it's a goofy premise, like you had mentioned, like kind of fish out of water, like someone takes over as the boss, and and it sometimes, like when Sigourney Weaver flies off the snow hill, and it gets a little kind of comic-y that way sometimes, but for the most part, it's a movie that's pretty grounded in reality. Because what I appreciated about it was that it didn't go into these like crazy wackadoo situations. They did a little bit. They did a little bit with Joan Cusack, but especially during the late '80s, I think the Academy did recognize these type of films of like, oh, this movie has kind of a silly premise, but it's trying to speak on relevant issues. So I can understand why I got the recognition at the time. It is a little hard though, just because. And I had to keep in mind, like you had mentioned earlier, of where the world was at when this was made, because I do think it's interesting. It's all about this female empowerment, but I kind of touched it on earlier. But I mean, they sure don't mind objectifying these women.
And they do it to each other too. Like Joan Cusack's gut check moment is, you need to stop lying. Also, you need to go back to your abusive boyfriend back from the neighborhood. What's wrong with you, Tess? And I was sitting there watching it and be like, I don't know if Sin's a good friend or not. Like, that's bad advice. Alec Baldwin's great in this, but he's a horror. Like, that character of Mick is a terrible person.
Terrible.
And they keep throwing it at her face. Like, you should give him another chance. He's really hurting. I'm like, she walked into actual coitus, and the film shows us, because it's the 80s. I'm like, yeah, I think it's time to change your address form at this point of your life too, Tess. Go ahead and run. That's a good move on your part. But yes, I agree with you.
Yeah. So yeah, it just, it was one of those things watching this. It was like, yep, this was directed by a white male. If maybe it was written by a male, talking about these female issues. But I can totally see. I mean, it's very it's inspirational of a sort of like not being satisfied with what life has given you. Yeah.
And I will say this, because I used to bump into Tess is all about being true and honest, except her whole premise of the plot is a lie. She takes over, she doesn't take over Sigourney Weaver's identity, but she passes herself off as something she's not in order to necessitate the plot. This viewing, I came back to give her a much wider berth, because this is where, I said that the film kind of craps on her for the first hour. Tess doesn't break rules until the job, the man, the life, like 3 things all happen in a row just to dump on her. And she's, I mean, and at this point she's been abused. And so she's like, I have no other option. So I'm going to take this crazy chance or whatever like that.
Yeah.
And I probably missed that the first viewing. This one, I'm like, okay, she's been pushed to the outer limits. She's done all this work and done nothing to show for it. When she talks about it with Sind, it's a little, it bounces off me. And so I'm like, well, that's just your justification for lying. This viewing, I'm like, oh yeah, she really does. Like, she has no other choice. I get it. The movie took its time. I'll go with you now, movie. Cool, bring it on. So,
yeah, and I think once again, I keep on saying this, but I touching on this one thing that the opening credits, I mean, in itself, kind of this movie is all about Tess, yet Melanie Griffith gets third billing in this movie. It's Working Girl starring Harrison Ford.
Yep.
Sigourney Weaver. And so, it's just, it's kind of like watching it today in today's eyes. It seems a little unbalanced, but I can easily see the strides, it was trying to make.
Sure.
But speaking of the opening credits, because I didn't know anything about this movie, I was like shocked by all the other people that were in it. I knew the 3 main ones for sure, because honestly, that's what the movie poster shows. But I had no idea Alec Baldwin was in this. I had no idea Joan Cusack was in it. I had no idea that Kevin Spacey is playing.
Ooh, that scene did not age well. That's a prescient piece of film right there, folks.
Yeah. It's
method acting for the last 40 years.
Yeah. It's like, it's like the student that comes into class the first day and causes like trouble. And you're like, is the rest of the school year going to be like this? Yes, it is. Yeah. So that's it. It's fun to see a very skinny Oliver Platt in this movie as well. But I think we've talked about Melanie Griffith and a little bit about Sigourney Weaver, but how do you feel about Mr. Indiana Jones, Han Solo, Harrison Ford in this role as Jack Trainer?
I love it. He turned comedic later in his career.
Yes.
When he started getting a little too old to do the whip and the lightsabers and things like, or the laser guns and stuff. He had a really good comedic flair because Jack is, once again, manipulative. He knows she's looking for him, and he hides his identity. So he's doing what she accuses him of trying to do. Yeah, but he ends up being a nice guy. He ends up being, I'm smart at business, but kind of dumb at relationships, and he leans into that. I've always said Indiana Jones is like one of my favorite characters of all time. Harrison Ford can look like a doofus at the drop of a hat. I know, yeah. He has his resting face of thinking, if it's not angry, is very, oh, wait a minute, did I leave something? Is my stove on? Like he kind of spaces out and he kind of looks dumb sometimes. Yes. He leans into it completely in this film. When they're talking business, he's like, the numbers got to add up and we got to do this and there's 7 million, blah, 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 blah. When they're talking personal, he's like, well, why can't we have lunch? What's lunch? Do we eat? I like to eat. He kind of leans into it. And I love to see it. I thought that he should have done more. Speaking of objectification, the famous scene of him changing his shirt and then just accepting the applause. Right. Yeah. Very few actors are going to pull that off to where you cheer along with, like, yeah, right. That's funny. He pulls that scene off. I'll let that one go. He really does. Yeah. And that almost kind of took me aback a little bit, watching that kind of resting face or whatever. Because even at like some point at this movie, I kind of started going like, is he a handsome guy? And I don't mean that, but kind of like, wait, what, but then, the scenes that you were talking about definitely plays up to it, and it's still Harrison Ford. But yeah, I think he's definitely the bright light to this movie, and it's fun. He, now he's had a very great career, so we've seen him in similar things like this now, but it was easy for me, especially as someone who loved Indiana Jones like you did, knowing that this was kind of a role that he didn't normally play, and so that's a whole lot of fun to see. Have you happened to see Shrinking on Apple TV Plus?
at all?
Shrinking. No, I have not. Is he in that?
Jason Segel's in it, but anyway, he, especially at his older age, his character is not exactly like this character, but it's more like laid back, sensitive. I mean, he's so funny in it. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if he wins an Emmy for his role in this show. And so, off of Shrinking, this seemed like a natural bridge, but obviously with this being filmed in the 80s, it had to be kind of I'm sure when people saw the billing at first, they're like, we love Harrison Ford, but can he do this? So
yeah, but he did that. Like, he did Mosquito Coast, he did Witness, he did Regarding Henry. He would do the safe movie, then he'd stretch himself a little bit. To me, when I saw this a couple of years ago for the first time, I was relieved because I saw 6 Days, 7 Nights. And that's when they were trying to make Harrison Ford be Chandler. When she's like, can't we fix it? He's like, yeah, we'll just glue it back up. Like, whoa, hey, you don't have those chops. You're a crusty old man. You still look great for a guy in his 60s, but you don't have that delivery. That's not you. Please stop trying to do that. So when I saw him very naturally just be funny without having the zippy one-liners, I was very pleasantly surprised.
Yeah. And I have to say, you have a little boy, and I know he's still small, like in the moment, but as we get older, it gets a little harder to carry your children to bed or whatnot. Him carrying Melanie Griffith up the stairs to his apartment, I mean, I was utterly impressed.
And he says he does 3 flights later on. He's like, I carried you 3 flights. They filmed that one time. And Harrison Ford's like, I'm the biggest damn name in this movie, Mike. We're not doing it again. Get a stunt double up here and film it from the, that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I did. I watched that and I was like, I also thought it was funny when he puts her in the chair and he starts having the conversation with her. I'm like, who are we talking to, Jack? She's out cold, this, and you're just kind of being weird at this point.
Very weird. And also, I'm glad that I was wondering, because I was very much new. I was watching an 80s movie, and her, like, the next morning they wake up in bed. She clearly doesn't have her dress on, and I'm glad they do eventually dress it, because it was the 80s movies. I was like, I don't know if they will. Like, I thought, like, is like, oh yeah, that's how all women sleep when they go to bed or whatever. And so I'm glad that they did address it. So I don't know. I thought that I'm still a little iffy on his explanation a little bit, but like for the 80s, it was probably a more solid explanation than what you would get from like the Alec Baldwin character, I guess. So.
Yeah, no, they play it as charming. Like, I took off your dress. I might have peeked, aren't I, roguishly? And I'm like, ooh, that crap don't fly today, buddy. This is not something one does. You are a bad dude.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
totally.
And I still don't really quite get, like, to put somebody to bed of having to take their dress off, but
Also, do you not own a couch? Like, put her in your bed and you go lay on a couch like a real man. Jack, and then must you disrobe all the way down to your skivvies, buddy? Like, this is getting a little weird, man. Just saying. Once again, poor Tess just gets the crap dumped on her in every situation she's in.
Yeah.
And don't trust your friend about someone else's pharmacy cabinet either.
Right. So I have to ask you, I know this was like, you saw this again, but if you can remember from the first time you saw it, I knew something was going to happen with these 3 characters, like, somehow. But did you see that twist that he was actually in a relationship with the Sigourney Weaver character?
Not at all. And they play it so subtly.
Yes.
Like, the big reveal of that scene is he's involved with someone else. She just happens to deduce that, holy crap, it's Catherine. I thought what was going to happen, because that the big moment's all going to happen at the worst moment, because it's a rom-com, it's going to be that scene.
Yeah.
So I figured she would walk in just fresh from the Alps with her cast. Like, when it got into the personal aspects of it being a double whammy, I was like, oh, okay, you're kind of this. I'm impressed. I did not see this coming at all, movie. I mean, maybe I should have. It should have. I mean, sure. Some people are like, what are you, stupid? Of course he's with Catherine. Come on. But yeah.
Yeah, no, it got me too. And as many movies as I've seen, I'm really, when I watch a movie, I'm not really looking for those sorts of things. So like it totally got, once again, like, yeah, when it was the twist of like, not that he was, and it kind of made sense that he would maybe be involved with someone who's not so serious. But yeah, when it is Catherine, I did think that played well. And I actually was legitimately thinking like, okay, how she can get herself out of this mess, because it's not like super rom-commy in the like, oh, what am I going to do now? Like it's a little bit more grounded. I really was like, how is this going to play out? But
yeah, totally. And I thought, when Catherine's talking about I have a fella and I'm expecting, I've put myself out there. I figured that's just more Catherine like telling Tess how wonderful she is, because she does it the whole time. She's constantly like, look at me, learn from me, do what I do. I'm awesome. You're not. You can do better. And so when it became like, you never know Jack is involved with anyone else until he mentions it. And also I was kind of like, dude, really? Seriously? Once again, another guy crapping on Tess, I was a little upset with Jack at that moment. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah. Am I wrong for, I know Catherine's supposed to be the villain in this, but I didn't necessarily like hate her. I know I do think she's definitely doing some things, but in some ways I feel like she was coming off as a more decent boss than a lot of people normally do, but I might be wrong.
That's the subterfuge, though, because I had that same reaction. Because when you first meet her, she's like, it's a two-way street. I'm here to help you. And like, she takes her idea for the dim sum. She talks to her at the party like a equal, all that stuff. I had that same conversation with Kristen. I was like, I always thought at first Catherine was going to be it. And Kristen's like, yeah, dummy, she's setting her up. Like, she sees that Tess has an idea. She keeps placating her and just steals from her. I'm like, oh, okay. I mean, had Catherine been like, Tess, I actually looked at your idea. I think I like it. Let's work together on this. Would Tess have been okay with that? I don't know. But I mean, that's not the movie that they want to show us.
No.
It's going to get a little zany there.
Yeah. Well, we live in even as cutthroat as business has always been, and certainly in New York City and certainly in the 80s. But now, more so now, like it's almost like somebody's raised to CEO level if they do crap on everybody. It's like we want the meanest person in the room. So
yeah, watching this and watching Succession, very different environments. You know what I'm thinking of.
Very much. So I didn't think this was like the most quotable movie ever, but is there any kind of, and it's okay if not, but was there any quotes that stood out to you?
Well, I think that this is obviously from the male lens. Yes. I never saw this movie, but I saw this in the commercial when she's like, well, maybe I'm just not that, or maybe I just don't like you. And he goes, and the elevator closed,
Yes.
That's a great line, but you have to be Harrison Ford in 1987 to pull that line off with that level of confidence. I tried it many times in my single days, never worked once, just putting it out there. But that was also, to me, him being silly. Like that was the part that I was really vibing with that character. Yeah. I think that I also like when Old Man Trash says, what did you say? And they both say bony ass. Like Melanie Griffin's proud of it. And Harrison Ford's like, we don't talk this way here.
Oren, this is a simple misunderstanding. And you cannot.
I can and I will. Now get your, what did you call it?
Bony ass.
Right. Bony ass out of my sight.
I think that's a fun scene. But there's not a show me the money in this movie, in my opinion, personally. I don't know. Other people, that's going to be an interesting question when I ask Kristen if she feels that way.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Yeah, one of the only things I had written down was what you had just mentioned was the fact that Bony Ass was just the kind of seemed like the new put down, I guess. I mean, I don't know. I don't have the history to know, but that was kind of like, I almost feel like if somebody said that to you now, if somebody told me that, I'd be like, oh, thank you.
I would be, God bless you. And it's like when I get carded these days, this is a nice little unexpected pick me up. I appreciate that. Yes.
Thanks for making my day. Yeah. Scenes. Were there scenes, some of your favorites that stood out to you?
I enjoyed the wedding When that
Yes.
comes up, I was like, oh, this is where we're gonna get rom-com-y. It's gonna get silly at the wedding. It didn't. It was they played it. That's the thing about this movie. Even when it's a crazy premise, it's all very grounded. It's all very nuanced. And I think that's a Mike Nichols thing too. That's a testament to his direction, which is why I think he deserves the accolade for it. The thing that I liked most about Tess is desperate to get out of her world.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't really like, the movie just assumes we all know why, like, because you're supposed to want a better life and this is it. And of course, the 80s success is the way to do that. I really dug when she goes back home for the engagement party for Sind and her husband, and Mick makes an ass of himself and all that stuff, because I found the juxtaposition of those two worlds very, very well done.
Yes.
So because you're in boardrooms, you're in meetings, you're in all these beautiful, opulent, skyscraper vistas of New York and the harbor and all these things. That's what they're showing you. When they get back to that tactile bar, and I've been in that bar, you've been in that bar. I mean, not that actual one, but we've been to those places, and and it's a little rough, and it's which makes me wonder of the longevity of Jack and Tess's relationship. How's he going to fare when we go back for the wedding on Long Island? But whatever, But that scene, I felt that a fully fleshed out, like, tie back to her character from the very beginning and stuff. So those are probably my two they really resonated authentically with me.
Yeah. I had the wedding scene as well written down. I do have to know, well, one, it's great when Ford, I say Harrison Ford, but when Jack goes to get the drinks and he just downs both of them about how uncomfortable he is with it. But also I want to say, okay, Tess, you're wanting to crash this wedding and you don't want to stand out and you wear white to the wedding. I thought that was a little interesting. And I thought almost to a point where somebody was going to point that out, but no, maybe that's the only thing they could get Melanie Griffith into that day. I don't know. So, and then, the initial meet cute, at that office party, that really stands out.
I have a head for business and a bod for sin. Is there anything wrong with that?
No.
And then also we mentioned Joan Cusack, but the moment where she has to kind of pretend to be Tess's secretary, is a pretty funny scene. So
I like that. I also caught, and I guess this was a thing in the 1980s, if you're a woman in the workplace and your fella comes and declares his love and y'all have a passionate kiss in front of the workforce, apparently everyone who works for you has to break out into applause, and somebody, the one in front, has to scream, "Way to go!" Because they do it in Officer and Gentleman. They do it this, and I think they do it in one other movie. I got to tell you, number one, never seen that happen in one of my workplaces. Thank goodness, because that's an HR violation right then.
Yeah.
I don't think applause, and I know we're not going to scream "Way to go" because I mean, we don't really say that anymore, but I digress. When that happened, I was like, oh, geez, they did the same thing in Officer. Okay, this is just a thing we do. Okay, cool. So,
so I don't know if you knew this, but Whitney and I worked at the same organization.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I was there for about 5 years. So anyway, and we purposely, obviously people knew us. They knew that we were married, but we tried to, as much as possible, to not showcase that. And, anyway, and I guarantee you, if we had this type of moment in front of our friends there, they would not have gone, "Way to go." They'd be like,
somebody has a jukebox and just starts playing "Let the River Run," and you'll just walk out the door. Beautiful moments. You should have gotten a naval officer's uniform and come and shown up and carry her out on the last day.
Okay,
that's what should have happened.
Maybe if I had done that, maybe that would have garnered the "way to go."
Movie musings.
I'm not trying to get yourself in trouble here, or I don't want you to tarnish anybody's name here, but this movie just begs the question: have you ever had a bad boss before?
A bad boss? Oh, yes. I've had one or two. One really stands out. Not to name names. I had a boss who would constantly scream, "I'm the boss." And not in an ironic Tony Danza-esque way. Like it was more like I'm the boss. You have to do this. My dad always told me, you're learning every second of every day, and you're going to learn from every job you have, especially from the bad ones. And you don't understand until after the fact how much you've learned about how not to behave. And I took that lesson a lot from this individual, because if you have to scream, I'm the boss, then you're not in charge of the room, and you're not the boss. You're trying to demand a loyalty that's not being given, and respect can't be demanded. It must be earned and given freely, of, that kind of thing. So yeah, I spent some time in, I was actually in the electrical equipment industry in 07, 08 when the housing market collapse was happening, and that industry just got hit hard. And I was in a corporate environment, and I saw some real subterfuge. I saw people being set up. I saw measures being taken so people would push other people in front of I guess we got to let him go type thing. And I was like, this is not for me. I'm not cut out for this kind of cutthroat world. So I hightailed it out of there.
Which boss is worse? Someone who constantly yells, I'm the boss, or a boss who has a mug that says world's best boss?
Great question. I don't know. I mean, I tend to give people a wide berth, but if someone's willing to demonstrate they're willing to lie, or actually manipulation and stuff like that, I'm like, okay, I can't deal with this, because I have if you're inept, if you're obtuse, if you're bad social skills, all these things we can work on. If you lie, I can't help you, because I never know what's real and what's not. So there's no reason me trying to build a bridge here, because I don't know if it's going anywhere or not. So that's just me.
In this movie, Tess says you can bend the rules plenty once you get to the top, but not while you're trying to get there. If you're someone like me, you can't get there without bending the rules. So, Brandon, are you a rule follower?
Oh my gosh, yes. Oh my gosh, yes.
Are you a firstborn?
No, I'm the youngest, actually.
Oh, okay.
But I had it's funny, I talked about this weekend with my wife, and we were up in Maryland with her family for an event. My folks had a restaurant growing up, and so I grew up working in a restaurant, and that was a great equalizer. From the day I could drive a car, my brothers and I were all kind of I have two older brothers, they're twins, they're 4 years older than me. We were all kind of on the same footing once we could all take a shift at the restaurant, run the kitchen, that kind of stuff. So I was absolutely the rule follower I mean, my mom always said I used to be like, you can't put the car in reverse and back out of the driveway. You don't have your seatbelt on, when I was a toddler. I was an annoying rule follower. Let me put it that way. I was the kid who was like, well, Nathan, he stole rocks from the playground when we were out there, and we were like, geez, McMinn, knock it off. So yeah, I was definitely a rule follower.
That's funny. Yeah, that totally makes sense. Like in the restaurant industry, did you watch the show The Bear? Have you seen that one?
No, I haven't.
Oh, it's on FX on Hulu. It just finished its first season. Second season starts this summer, but anyway, I think you should check it out. And I don't think it'll totally relate to your situation, but it seems like anybody in that industry, from what I've heard, is like, yep, they got it right. So yeah, you should check that out. We talked about the wedding scene. Have you ever crushed a wedding before?
I've never crashed a wedding. I've been accused of being a wedding crasher. Okay. Our buddy Eric's dad got remarried about 10 years ago, and Eric and a couple other people our age were in the wedding as extra groomsmen. So long story short, when it was time to leave the church and go to the reception, everyone that was our age stayed at the wedding for photos. Myself, past and future guest host on this podcast, Kyle Radford, we went to the reception, got a beer, turned around, and it was us and a room full of 65-year-olds. And finally, this nice woman came over. She goes, "Are y'all crashing? Do you not know what this is?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am, we're crashing, and we're here to sell you insurance." And she cracked up. Yeah, so that was fun.
That's a great story. I don't think I've ever had the opportunity to do such a thing, but going back to the rule following, I don't know if I could ever do it.
Well, I tell you, now that I've had a wedding and I know how serious those menus and like an invite is, I would never do that to somebody. If I think I possibly for any reason couldn't make it, I'll RSVP no. I am very respectful of the wedding RSVP process now in my life.
I know our RSVPs change in your life for sure once you've gone through a wedding.
Absolutely.
Just
Absolutely.
the etiquette there.
Oh, and also I always pick the chicken now because I'm like, somebody has to pay for this. I'll take the cheap one. What do I care? I mean, I'm going to make my money back on the open bar anyway. So yeah, don't buy me a steak. It's cool.
Yeah.
Rom-com rankings.
Right from the get-go, you kind of wondered if this was actually a romantic comedy. But what do you rank the romantic chemistry between the leads here? Tess and Jack here.
Tess and Jack. This was a hard one for me. I'll get to my full denouement at the end, but yeah, I'm going to give that 2 hearts.
Okay.
On the chemistry.
Yeah.
One beating proud and true, one reluctantly beating, but 2 hearts there.
Yeah, I agree with you. Actually, I'm glad, man, from the get-go, I'm glad I've been falling in line with you, because watching this movie and knowing how loved it was, I just kind of, I was like, I'm not quite, vibing with this movie like, I've heard about. And so anyway, I'm kind of with you. I mean, not that these 2 characters are necessarily bad. They're kind of convenient for each other, I think, but
that is a wonderful way to put it. When in fact, watching it the other night, when they turn to each other right before the boardroom, which, by the way, read the room and pick your moment, man. When he's like, "I love you," and she goes, "I love you." Yeah. I'm like, I don't really feel like we've earned this. There's a lot of feeling for not enough time or spent with this. Like, we're jumping fast, guys. So whatevs, but okay.
Yeah. So the second category, and this might be a little controversial, but so the best, not the category, but my ranking at least is the best friend, and it's Joan Cusack, who plays Sin. And so you kind of hit it, at the top of this thing as far as like the constant bad advice that she gives her in this movie. So she's very supporting. That's why I do think she is good. She's there for Tess, like no matter like what she decides. But before I give my ranking, what do you rate Sin?
I have it. Well, for the reasons you're talking about, and for the movie almost solely puts the comedic, laugh factory on Joan Cusack's shoulders.
Yes.
Because of that, sometimes she doesn't fit. Sometimes she fits beautifully. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, and she's well aware of the 2 worlds Tess is trying to straddle into. She's the only person that can go with her those places. I put her at a 3. Okay. I liked her a lot. I didn't love her, and I like me some Joan Cusack. I'm a Joan Cusack fan, except for the Toy Story films. I cannot stand that character in the Toy Story films. But just stop it. Just stop it. But yeah, I put her at 3.
Okay. Yeah, I gave her 2.5, more so for like the character, not Joan Cusack herself, because she's providing a lot of life in this movie, especially being the counterpart to Tess, for sure. Anyway, I was a little surprised to see the nomination for Best Supporting Actress. I feel like even Joan Cusack probably in the moment was like, "Oh, okay, sure."
That's going to up my price when I ask for another role. I'm all for it, but don't know why that's there. Absolutely, yeah.
But also, we haven't really talked a whole lot about the style in this movie, but I'm sure this is like, I mean, we all have those like cringy photos we look back on. This has to be a movie that Joan Cusack looks back at and is like, oh my gosh. Like, I mean, they are relentless with her hair and makeup in this movie.
Yeah, but think about it, 4 years prior to this, she was in a back brace and 16 candles. So she's probably okay with the giant wall forehead of teased bangs and whatnot.
Very true. Very true. So the third category is the soundtrack. And he made reference to the song "Let the River Run," which is the opening sequence of this movie. It's also, I think it closes the movie as well.
It's also the score.
Yes.
Like when she's walking around contemplating life, you hear the doon 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 doon.
Yeah. And so it received the Academy Award for Best Original Song and the Golden Globe Award for Best Original Song. And so a lot of the soundtrack is composed of some Carly Simon songs. Not all of them were available on Spotify. So apparently Carly Simon has a a beef against Spotify, I guess. So, but she
Mhm.
did some of the score. Also, I think the other notable songs that stand out in this movie is "The Lady in Red" and "I'm So Excited" by the Pointer Sisters. But once again, the "Let the River Run" song, I just, I don't know. It's definitely a song, I guess. I don't know. What are you feeling? I don't know. Anything that throws in, lyrics about, Jerusalem and this movie being what it is, I'm like, oh, that's quite a leap. But
Yeah, they were definitely going for something there. I actually rated it very high. I gave this one
okay,
four hearts because
okay,
I actually downloaded the soundtrack. It's quite good. I was
okay,
like, this is a really good soundtrack. I like the song "Let the River Run." I
okay.
will say, prior to ever seeing this film, like Kristen's like, the movie starts and she starts humming along with that song. I'm like, what is this? She's like, this is the song for the movie. I'm like, no, "Lady in Red" is the song from Working Girl. Everybody knows that. So, and that's only, they dance one time to that song and they dance for like 2-3 seconds of it and they move on.
Yeah.
Like that song is barely in this film, "Lady in Red." "Let the River Run" is threaded throughout this. Like I said, it's the score, it bookends the film. But yeah, I dig it. I mean, it's the concept they're trying to make is, not to go too deep into it, but they're like, this is the new way of path of bettering your life, blah, 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 blah. Cool. But I'm a Carly Simon fan. So
Okay.
I dig it.
Okay. Soundtracks, it's always, I think music is very subjective. And so I personally give it 2.5, but I don't at all discredit your ranking there. It's just personally for me, "Let the River Run" just makes me do the opposite, I guess. I don't know. So anyway, okay. So the fourth one, "Chasing / Declaration of Love." So I want to hear your take on this one.
Well, first off, let me just say, I love that you put this as a category for how you're ranking rom-coms, because there's always a proactive manifestation of physical attribute. If it's the male, he has to go do something brave and like run against traffic or something like that. If it's a female, she usually has to chase him down, usually to the airport, in a rom-com. So I'm glad that you put that staple in there. I gave this one heart.
Oh, okay.
And for both of them. As aforementioned, when they say "I love you" in the boardroom, I'm like, I don't know if I buy that. Later on, when he's like, "I just have to know, was I part of the scheme too?" And she's like, "No, you think I'd say I love you just to get a deal?" And I'm like, that's a valid question from Jack Trainer at this moment of our lives. Like, you lied to him completely about who you are. And then you you just get up and walk out of the room. He hasn't seen you since. So he's like, "I just have to know." And she's like, "How dare you? Of course I would. What kind of person do you think I am?" It's like, Tess, he doesn't know you. So I bumped hard into both scenes of well, of course I love you. I mean, Jack turns to integrity and said, "No, she's the one who thought of this. We have to see. I'd hear her out, sir." He doesn't say, "I'll follow you blindly because I love you so much." I mean, they allude that that's where it goes, and it is a rom-com, going to go to Happy Worldland. But both of those scenes, I was like, oh, this is not the strength of this film when these two. But again, their chemistry is a little off there too. She doesn't play righteous indignation very well, and he doesn't play hopeful romantic, he doesn't play like wistful, desperate to know. I mean, he's still Harrison Ford. He's like, "Oh, okay, well, you did love me, cool. You didn't, that's cool. Those other 8 women do. I'm awesome," that kind of thing. So I bumped into that scene a little bit.
Okay. Yeah. So I totally get what you're saying there. I think and honestly, the "I love you," even though that's a clear like declaration of love, I almost kind of framed it more like the closing scenes that kind of like this one with the whole everything outside the elevator. She's leaving the office. She's got her box, and the way that he stands up for her in front of everybody. Finally, it takes him a bit to get there. And so I gave it 3 hearts just because I did like this kind of end scene and how everything kind of closed together, even with the bony ass comments and things like that. But I do think there is like the real that moment where he finally does like kind of stick up for her. I really liked, and I was interested to see like where it was going. Although I will say that, and not to be too nitpicky with this movie, but the whole elevator situation that was happening, like I just kind of help think of like, the doors are conveniently closed and stay open for these moments of dialogue and everything like that. I don't know if he caught on to that, but like there's that whole scene where, all the big bosses are all in that one elevator, and the elevator has to stay open for like 2 minutes. And I was like, we're not going to get any kind of like accidentally, starting to shut or some kind of buzzing sound. But when it's ready to go up, man, those doors shut quick.
It's like a Star Trek set. It's closed.
Yeah.
But old man Trask can jump through and be like, well, let me hear you out, young lady.
Right. Yeah.
And then their elevator beats Sigourney Weaver's up. I'm like, well, if I'm Sigourney Weaver, I'm like, please stop hitting the buttons. I'm obviously in the middle of a situation. Can you guys just let me get to 37 and then y'all can have the elevator back?
Yeah. So that part, actually, because I started getting into this, maybe I shouldn't rank it high because I started getting into this whole mental space. But I was like, okay, that makes a little sense that they beat her up there just because there were so many people on that elevator that she was on.
Yeah.
But then I went back to like, but it was only them two in that elevator. That was like, that's unrealistic too. That like when they needed to go up, nobody was in the elevator. So anyway,
it's a little convenient.
Yeah. As I'm talking, I'm kind of talking myself down a little bit, but
I will say that scene when they're in the elevator, the three of them, does work because her explanation of the deal is so outside the world of business. Like it's perfectly in line with the character of Tess. She's like, I was reading the variety page and I looked at the people page and I looked at this and I know about business and stuff. That was a believable journeyman's explanation of a big business deal. So I thought that scene landed very well, especially because then all of a sudden Catherine can't do it because she doesn't have an idea. She stole it. Yeah. But that was, and Melanie Griffith was good in that scene. That scene played well for me. So see, you're talking yourself out of it. I'm talking myself into it. That's what's going on here.
So now this is one of your wife's favorite films. So she's rewatched a lot, but so what do you give this as a rewatchability ranking?
I give it a 4. I've enjoyed this movie. I mean, I don't love this movie and it's not the cultural phenomenon for me. And if you came over one day, I wouldn't crack a beer and like, dude, I hope you like Working Girl because you got to watch this thing. But I've seen it now 2, maybe 3 times, and I'll see it again. I mean, in a year or so, we'll watch it again, and I'll return to this movie willing and able. Just absolutely, let's watch this because I think that it's not. It's got gravitas to pull you in, but it's light and breezy enough to be rewatched over and over again and have some fun with it. I really dig the soundtrack. Not saying it's for everybody. And the things that I bump into are quibbles. They're not necessarily like, oh, well, I'm not watching this again type thing. So yeah, I give this high marks for rewatchability. Okay.
So I really hope, I don't think I may have met Kristen in person before, but I really hope I'm not like on her like crap list after all this, but I gave this rewatchability 2.5. Now, that said, I do think this movie is worth seeing. But I feel like it's a good kind of, for me personally, a good one and done. I don't know if I would garner much more from watching it again. So, and especially if you're looking for like a rom-com, this is a solid like 2-hour kind of runtime. Like it's a little bit heavier than probably your other type of rom-coms, but
sure.
I can see it from the Harrison Ford aspect of it, and even actually the Sigourney Weaver aspect of it. Once again, Melanie Griffith just did not do much for me in this, and I saw doing some reading that they were trying to kind of revive this story for Broadway and stuff, and I actually really saw that. I think there's a lot of meat to this story, and I think definitely I'm not a huge person into like remaking stuff, but I could see how you could adapt this easily into today's world. And so that kind of appealed to me of like, maybe this rewatchability would be higher if Melanie Griffith wasn't the person in it, but
that's fair because she's in almost every scene. The whole movie is about her. And so if you don't connect with her, you're going to have a rough 2 hours, to be fair.
Yeah.
I'll also add, sir, you're a Sooner fan. You're already dead to Kristen. I'm sorry. I just want to, make sure that we're totally open and honest here.
I didn't mention it on the recording, but I think this is a second time we've done this, and we are both wearing opposing, rival shirts here.
Yes.
So, yeah. But it shows that movies can bring, people together. Yeah,
it bridges gaps between intelligent people like myself and you.
Hey.
No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Recommendations.
Anything you're watching or listening to or reading that you're really digging?
I'm finishing up Gentleman in Moscow, which was recommended to me by my older brother. I'm on the fence about it. I've got about 50, 60 pages left, and that's where we're going to make or break it with this book. I'm really hoping, because a lot of people have recommended it to me, I'm really hoping it's good. It needs to get there. As far as a book, I will say we recently just went and saw Broadway in Austin did To Kill a Mockingbird, which was written by Aaron Sorkin.
Yeah.
And it was so good. And Richard Thomas played Atticus. And oh man, I loved it. I was enthralled for 2 hours and 20 minutes. It was wonderful.
Yeah, I saw your pictures from that, and I was extremely jealous. So that's pretty cool that it came to Austin. So usually, OKC gets some shows that I know, that Austin gets. Like they usually travel between the two, but I haven't seen that on the radar around here. So I don't.
Bummer, yeah. Because it was on its way the year COVID hit because it got canceled, and I was really dejected because usually if they don't make it, they don't come back a lot of time. So I think they made an effort to send that one around again. So, but yeah, if you can travel to see it, it is absolutely worth it.
Okay, awesome. I'm excited to kind of recommend this to you because I'm just going out on a limb here. But were you a fan of Saturday Night Live in the 90s?
Just a smidge, absolutely.
Okay, awesome. So if anybody was, I think they would appreciate this. But for a long time, Conan O'Brien has his own podcast. It's Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend. And lately, they've been doing kind of a little series, and it's the Lost Hans and Franz movie. So apparently him and Smigel co-wrote this movie that never got developed. But they basically, right now, there's 3 parts out. At the time of this recording. So I don't know how many ultimately will be, but man, it is, if you were a fan of like the Billy Madison movies or the Wayne's World movies, it's like listening to one of those movies, but new. Now it completely makes sense why this movie was not ever developed or made. But I mean, just hearing Dana Carvey and Kevin Nealon do these characters again, and so they read a little bit about the movie, but then they talk about it as well. So I would suggest that it's a really fun listen.
Yeah, I love that podcast. I will absolutely check that out.
Yeah, it's delightful. So next week we will be talking about one of my favorite movies, and it's number 5 on this best rom-coms list, and it's Jerry Maguire. So Brandon, quick thoughts on that movie?
I'm a huge fan. I already referenced the Show Me the Money in this episode here too. Yeah. That was honestly, I hadn't seen probably Say Anything at that part of my life because I think that came out when I was like 14, 15. That was my introduction to Cameron Crowe. Yeah. And so I loved it. And then after that came Almost Famous. And so I was like, oh man, this guy's a genius. So yeah, I loved Jerry Maguire. Yeah.
I'm really excited to talk about that movie. And if anything, give me another reason to watch that movie. So check that out next week. And so as always, you can visit our website, moviesarelife.com, for all our episode reviews and more. You can find the other episode Brandon was on where we talked about a much different movie, Heat. So you can go find that episode, listen to it. I think that was a really fun discussion. If you love this podcast, please take a moment to rate and review it. This really helps with us finding new listeners. So thanks again, Brandon, for being a guest on this. And I just want to encourage everybody once again to check out and subscribe to his podcast, Second Best Picture. You can find it wherever you listen to podcasts.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. It was great.
Yeah. Thanks again to everybody for listening. And remember, don't fetch coffee for someone unless you're getting some for yourself.